Hello there. The German and EU woke lefties breathed a sigh of relief when the so-called far-right AfD did not win the Brandenburg elections as feared by them over the weekend. But the bigger picture shows they should be very worried indeed. So the so-called far-right party, Alternative for Germany, or AfD, was beaten on Sunday by the lefty SPD. So the wokesters are feeling somewhat relieved, having seen off the threat of the far right. However, the reality is that the AfD was only a whisker behind the SPD in Brandenburg. The SPD won 32 of the 88 seats on 30.9% of the vote, but the AfD came in second with 30 seats and 29.2% of the vote. In fact, both parties increased their seat numbers by 7. But while the SPD vote share increased by 4.7%, the AfD increased theirs by 5.7%. But when looking at all the recent elections in East Germany, in Thuringia, Saxony and Brandenburg, what we see is a large surge in support for the AfD. To the point that, according to the German NTV news channel, the AfD is now the largest party within the 6 German states that make up the former East Germany, the German Democratic Republic. The AfD has 138 seats there, and the CDU, the party of the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, will only have 128 seats. The shift in balance of power towards the right comes after the AfD's victory in Thuringia, which represented the first time the party came out on top in a state election in its history, with 32.8% of the vote, reports Breitbart.com. And this is from within the area that suffered under communist rule as an ally to the then USSR. Maybe what the citizenry there see is another USSR-style body in the making, in the form of the European Union. Now, as I understand it, the next German state elections will be in March next year in the northern German state of Hamburg, where the AfD currently only has 6 seats. It will be interesting to see how the AfD fares there over the coming months. Will the AfD take more seats there as well? Especially after the protests against the AfD in Hamburg and in the Saxony capital city of Dresden earlier this year, with AP News reporting at the time that hundreds of thousands of people in Germany turned out for a third weekend to protest the popularity and policies of the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD party. A rally in Hamburg took place on Sunday with a theme of "For Diversity and Our Democracy, Hamburg stands united against the AfD." Organisers said that up to 100,000 people marched through the northern city. Then, if you remember, there were also protests against the AfD in Düsseldorf, Aachen, Osnabrück, Kiel, Sigmaringen and Wittenberg. But it's not helping the woke cause, is it, all those protests? Because the AfD is still gaining ground. Just like the efforts of the woke UK state against the rising popularity of a certain Mr. T. Despite just telling the truth, he is probably destined for jail. And one of the issues he has actively highlighted for many years has been that of the grooming gangs. But issues such as this are not for mere mortals such as he to involve himself in. No, the gangs and their victims are the multiculturalism bargaining chips of the internationalist great and good. And for dabbling in such matters, the state has hounded him and will exact their revenge. So come and support him on the 26th of October in a huge and peaceful London rally. Now, one of the big things these anti-AfD protesters and their supporters in Germany say is that they are somehow protecting democracy by taking action against the AfD and even calling for the AfD to be banned, like it's some sort of terrorist organisation. But when in democratic elections the AfD gain a growing list of gains as their support base grows, the lefties try to freeze them out by clubbing together and refusing to work with duly elected AfD politicians. And this is all under the system of proportional representation, of course, where the idea is that all voters' voices are meant to be heard equally and represented equally. Except, of course, where anyone who disagrees with the woke open borders and unaccountable lefty international control over our lives is concerned. Anyone who dissents that utopian ideal must be banned and shunned, and in the UK, potentially imprisoned. Now, as the AfD gains more traction, it could pose a problem for the European Union, as there are German federal elections in a year's time. Would be great to see some political upheaval there, wouldn't it? Especially as people wake up to realise that their government has no real intention of stopping mass inward migration, but just to make noises about stemming the flow when the subject is raised. Sounds a bit like successive UK governments, doesn't it? In fact, like all successive Western governments, bar one or two brave ones who are prepared to take the usual racist flak from the annoyingly vocal woke lefties. Now, interestingly, the German constitution, the basic law, born after the Second World War, is designed to stop another political coup such as that which happened in the 1930s. And it includes basic rights such as rights to dignity, freedom, privacy, free assembly, freedom of the press, and the right to political asylum. But we also hear about German plans to try and rein in the free speech of social media. And then, with Germany being an EU member state, we hear that Brussels is clamping down on Elon Musk's X, to the point that back in October last year there was talk that Musk would remove the X service from Europe. The only free speech the EU and German establishments want their people to hear is the approved official narrative as spewed out by a controlled media. States like these want access to social media data on IP addresses and phone numbers, etc. And if a social media platform will not comply, then goodbye to them. Your social media must be an open book to your government rulers, especially if you have a tendency to dissent with that particular government. So as ever, as the AfD gains support, as it assuredly will, the machinery of the German and EU state will concentrate more on trying to discredit and stir up actions and protests against them and its members. Be in no doubt. And the more that the AfD grows, the more open and obvious will be the efforts of the state to suppress it. Think again along the lines of a certain Mr. Robinson. And back in May, Elon Musk replied to a fine that Rosenberg AfD leader Marie-Therese Kaiser was forced to pay for incitement to hatred for regurgitating uncomfortable government statistics on crime and ethnicity. Are you saying the fine was for repeating accurate government statistics? Was there anything inaccurate in what she said? Retorted Musk on his X platform. Probably not, but accuracy is not on the woke agenda. You always have to remember that for the very vocal and active woke left, theirs is the only acceptable politics. Theirs is the only path you are allowed to follow. And any action they take against those who disagree with them is acceptable, whatever that action is, even prison. Well, acceptable to the wokesters, anyway.